250,000 children will go hungry this Christmas. That is just one of the headlines from the Childhood Trust's Cold, Hungry and Stressed report, outlining the shocking levels of poverty families across London have been plunged into ahead of the festive season.
We wanted to research really what the impact was at the moment and what the forecast is going forward. Because one of the clear findings in the report was a 50% increase in children turning to charities because of the reversal of the uplift in universal credit. So the cut of £20 a week is already having a really big effect on the charities and the projects that we're funding.
It cannot be right that in a country as rich as ours, so many children are left to go hungry. And the worst thing is that this is being brought about by active government choices. They are raising bills for working families and raising taxes. The energy bills are soaring, and we've seen a £20 a week cut in universal credit. So where the government should be helping to lift children out of poverty, they are actively plunging more children into poverty, and that's a disgrace.
£20 a week might not sound like a huge amount, but for many families, it's the difference between being able to eat or not. The government announced a £500 million winter support scheme, but the Childhood Trust report says that this would average out to just £4.04 a week per household.
Nazura works at a local charity and is mum to 4 children, who she raises with her husband, who works as a taxi driver. We've changed Nazura's name and dubbed her voice for her anonymity.
The money that I get is still not comfortable to provide for my family. In the winter, especially now, knowing that we cannot cover for the energy bills, that's a worry because we don't put the heating on throughout we keep on on and off it. Yeah, and providing all the necessities for the children. You can feel their time is, but not knowing that sometimes you cannot give fresh foods every day. That's something that worries people.
I think the worst thing is how you can't live your life, because life goes really quickly, and if you can't even live it properly, there's not even really any point. You can't go anywhere. There's not really anything you can do.
If you're on a very small income anyway, losing that money makes a difference between having a hot meal and giving your children sandwiches. It is a big thing for my constituents. Hackney remains one of the poorest areas in London. I mean, it's obviously got areas that are more middle class, but overall it's one of the poorest areas in London. And the cuts in universal credit and overall government policies and their cuts in funding for local authorities are very difficult for my constituents.
Many outside of London picture the city as glistening and glamorous, but the capital has the highest rates of childhood poverty in Britain, with 700,000 children, 34% of the total child population in London, living in relative poverty.
Poverty is an issue right across the country, and quite rightly people are talking about regional inequalities and the north-south divide, which is a very real divide, but we shouldn't forget that even within big cities like London, we have some of the highest levels of child poverty in Britain. We've got higher living costs, we've got families that are really struggling to make ends meet, including when both parents are in work, and that's why we need national government action to tackle child poverty. It's not something that local councils couldn't do on their own. They've had their budget slashed over the last 11 years too.
A report by the House of Lords Public Services Committee, led by Baroness Armstrong, found that spending on early intervention support in areas of England with the highest levels of child poverty fell by 53% between 2010 and 2019.
There is a real crisis for vulnerable children at the moment. It has got worse during the pandemic, but the trajectory was going up in terms of the numbers of vulnerable children in this country before the pandemic. And this means that the government really need to see this as one of the key things they need to tackle coming out of the pandemic. How can we level up if we neglect the needs of these vulnerable children.
The most important issue in shaping your life chances is sort of early years and childhood. And if we are slashing the services, slashing childcare, slashing mums and dads' wages, you run the risk of a generation of quite damaged children because they've been brought up in poverty and insecurity.
For most, Christmas is a time of celebration, but many children won't be expecting to receive any presents this year.
One little girl, aged 9, said, "There's no point getting up on Christmas morning," she said, "because there's nothing to get up for." She said, "I'd just stay in bed and wish the day would go away." And that's what we're dealing with. So, as you say, the report did cover a great deal, but I find that one statistic to really be, to sum it all up, really. And that little girl that just won't bother getting up. How sad that is, how unnecessary that is, and how all of us have way too much of everything, and some of us have hardly enough of anything.
The media is saturated with images of, Christmas and all the goodies and all the expensive food and the presents. And some of my constituents feel quite guilty that they don't think they'll be able to provide a good Christmas for their children.
We reached out to 8 London-based Conservative MPs. Only one, Felicity Buchan, responded saying they were busy.
I don't think, because they're not directly affected, I don't think they care that much, which they should, because it is affecting the people that are voting for them. Yeah.
And does it make you frustrated?
100%, yeah. It is frustrating if you don't get help from the up there. Who will give it to you? We rely on fund donations and help from the community that sometimes they don't even get it. Yeah.
By degrees, we slip into a kind of acceptance of these situations. And it's self-evident there's an acceptance of it, because I don't see any great initiatives to tackle these things. We have more food banks now than we've ever had in the course of history. And yet, we're constantly told that the economy is booming. We've got very low unemployment. Everything's fantastic. Well, when you go to some of the food banks that we're funding, and you see 200 people queuing up for over 2 hours for a £10 bag of food, things don't look like they're thriving in those communities.
It does give us a lot of worry, and you just think like you're overthinking all the time, and it's not a nice thing, because if you're constantly thinking about something that is a worry, you're thinking how to keep up with it, then you lose up on other stuff, like having special time with the children, taking them to places. So we rely on other things in the community that they are running for free, so I cannot take them some places that other parents can take them.